Alright, in this video I'm going to show you how to solve a quadratic equation by completing the square. So over here to the right I have listed the steps that I take to complete a square. The first thing is to make sure that the leading coefficient is 1. So like for example here our leading coefficient is 3. So we're going to have to deal with that. Then we look at the x, or the coefficient to the x, which is the 5. We divide it by 2, square that result, and then add the value to the equation. So these are the steps I'm going to go through, and hopefully you'll be able to follow along. Alright, so first things first is we're going to make this leading coefficient equal to 1. So in order to do that, since there's a 3 there, we're going to divide the whole thing by 3. That means every one of this term, this term, this term, and even this 26 on the other side is going to be divided by 3. It's going to make it look a little sloppy, but that's just how it works. So our new equation is going to be x squared plus 5 over 3x plus 2/3 equals 26/3. Okay, next, before I even complete the square, I'm going to remove this third term because I want to complete the square and have that right there. So I'm going to subtract 2/3 from both sides. So subtract 2/3 here and subtract 2/3 here, giving us a new equation ready for completing the square. So we get 5/3 x. This is no longer here, equals what is that, 24 over 3, which is 8. Glad that worked out really well there. So now we want to figure out what term we're going to add right here. We're going to start completing the square. So now that the leading coefficient to this x squared term is 1, we are now going to go ahead and go to the second step, which is divide this coefficient of x by 2. So 5/3 divided by 2 is 10/3. If you don't believe me, here I'm work it out over here. 5/3 divided by 2. Oh, I was wrong. 5/3 divided by 2 is 5/3 times 1/2, which comes out to be 5/6. So that's what's going to be added right here is our 5 over 6. Stop it. Okay, so I only have done the second step so far, which was divide the x term, this 5/3 by 2, which gave me 5/6. Now my next step is to square the result. So that means I'm going to take this 5/6. So let me get another color right here. So I'm going to take this 5/6 and square it. So if I take the 5/6 and square it, I'm going to end up with 25 over 36. Now that is the value that I'm going to add to my equation over here. So I'm going to add 25 over 36 here, but whatever I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other side. So that means I have to add a 25 over 36 on the right side as well to keep it nice and balanced. Okay, so now I have this perfect square trinomial. This perfect square trinomial can factor into a binomial that is squared. And since this 25 over 36 came from 5/6, I know that when I factor it, I'm going to end up with x plus 5 over 6 quantity squared, because this is a perfect square trinomial. Perfect square trinomials always factors like this. Okay, and over here I have to do a little work. We do some, so magically I'm going to go 8 plus 25 over 36. Hopefully you know how to deal with fractions, and this is going to be the result. Alright, so like I said, 313 over 36. So at this point, so after I simplify that, at this point I want to start solving for x. And since we have a quantity being squared, in order to get rid of that square, we're going to actually take the square root of both sides of the equations. Now, anytime we take the square root, we're going to end up with the plus or minus. We're going to end up with both roots here. So we end up with x plus 5, 6 equals the plus or minus of this right here, and the 36 can simplify, so I'm going to get plus or minus square root of 3 over 13 over 6, because I know the square root of 6 simplifies to this thing right here. Let me move up, give me some space right here. Okay, so now I'm going to end up with two equations, one with the addition of this value and the other one with the subtraction of this value. So I'm going to have x plus 5, 6 equals square root of 13 over 6, and over here I'm going to have x plus 5, 6 minus square root of 313 over 6, or equals, there we go, equals the negative square root of 313 over 6. So I go ahead and solve both of these equations. As you notice, this square root, or this number, this value 313, is not a perfect square, so I would either use a square root chart or use my calculator to figure out how much this is. Or a third way is approximate. Say what is the closest perfect square to 313, and then go ahead and use my approximation there. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so I'm going to choose to go ahead and change the fractions, all the fractions, into decimal values, and then solve for x using a calculator. Okay, so notice when I change these to approximations, the equal signs are no longer equal signs. They're the approximate, the wavy equal sign. And so let's go ahead and solve. So if I want to solve for x, I'm going to subtract the 0.83 from both sides, giving me one of my x values. So x is going to be about 2.12 for this part of the equation. And over here, if I subtract 0.83 from this side, I'm going to end up with x is about negative 3.78. Okay, so it's an approximation. So it's about -4 and +2, depending on when you did your approximation, or if you used a calculator or the other method there. But these are the steps. Yes, it gets messy, but it's okay to use a calculator for these problems because it does get a little messy. All right, so hopefully this helps you out, and good luck in trying to complete or solve a quadratic equation by completing the square.